I will take you back to 19th century Japan, a time when the nation was modernizing, embracing Western culture and technology. However, this transformation left some clinging to the past, among them the samurai. To set the stage for this story, I must first provide some historical context and insight into Japan's internal affairs. With that said, let's dive into the video. Saigō Kokichi was the birth name of Saigō Takamori. He came into this world in Kagoshima on December 7, 1827. His ancestors were humble but respected samurai, and they were tasked with protecting the feudal ruler. Standing at nearly 6 feet tall as an adult, he stood out among his fellow samurai. He was the eldest of 7 children. People praised his valor, generosity, and swordsmanship. It is believed that everyone can attain awakening through the correct kinds of spiritual development, under the guidance of a master. And he was also taught this notion in Zen Buddhism. In the 17th century, the Tokugawa shogunate instituted sakoku, literally the closed country. Japan would one day be completely sealed off, with no one allowed to enter or leave. The duration of the closure was 214 years. However, as a result, Japan lagged behind every other developed nation in terms of technological progress throughout the last 2 centuries. The U.S. Navy's Commodore Perry docked in Edo Bay, Japan in 1853. The Japanese were likely scared of the ship, but it was their first look at the future. To try to scare the Japanese, Perry had his ships aim their guns toward the town. After delivering a letter to the Japanese officials in attendance, Perry left for Hong Kong, saying he would return the following year to await a response from Japan. This letter requested the opening of Japanese ports to facilitate a trade agreement. Perry came back in 1854 with double the number of ships. Perry signed a drafted treaty that addressed all of the letter's demands. It was still unclear, though, what Japan's foreign strategy would be. Although Tokugawa Ieyasu, the 13th shogun, commanded the army, his physical and mental frailty prevented him from enduring the challenges. A plan was now underway to select a new shogun. Tokugawa Yoshitomi succeeded his father as shogun in 1858. 30 years had passed for Saigō. He wed Ikana, who belonged to an illustrious family. In Kyoto, Saigō had already assumed the role of leader of the Satsuma army when he was 40 years old. Having assisted in the 1866 secret alliance negotiations between Satsuma and Choshu, he had gained expertise in diplomacy. He was also instrumental in 1867 in getting Japan's military leader, the shogun, to resign. By 1867, the palace gates had been captured by Saigō's infantry. The Meiji Restoration started when the youthful emperor read a proclamation to a gathering of nobility. With the shogunate abolished, the imperial system was reinstated, and the emperor was granted absolute power. In 1868, the shogunate and the newly formed imperial army fought a short war. Saigō overcame the shogun's backers in northern Japan after negotiating the capitulation of Edo, now Tokyo. Everything in the imperial court, from the government to the emperor himself, was now safe. Despite receiving recognition for his devotion and dedication, Saigō declined to be a part of the new administration and instead retired. His role in Japan's transition to a new era earned him the title of National Hero. In 1871, after much persuasion, Saigō joined the government and was entrusted with the leadership of 10,000 troops, who formed the Imperial Guard. He was elevated to the position of full general in 1873. The modernization process in Japan was about to commence. Saigō, the nation's foremost military figure, was unable to resolve the controversy within the government regarding the implementation of mandatory military service in Japan. If all classes were required to undergo universal training, the long-established dominance of the samurai in the military would become obsolete. Saigō could already see the major shifts happening because he was not fighting the issue. A samurai at heart, he struggled to decide if Japan would be better off without the samurai and their unique way of life, or if it should focus on modernization. Saigō wanted to stick to the old ways of life and disagreed with the argument about Japan's modernization. He famously argued that the funds should be used for military modernization rather than a rail network. He further maintained that Japan ought to wage war against Korea due to the latter's denial of Emperor Meiji's legitimacy as head of state. Saigō went as far as stating that he would travel to Korea as an envoy, where his actions would incite such a ruckus that he would be assassinated, providing Japan with the pretext for war. Saigō addressed every criticism by declaring his intention to sacrifice himself for his nation. The emperor gave his approval to his plan, but top government officials were against it. and it never came to fruition. Saigō, infuriated at the turn of events, returned to his former residence and resigned from his responsibilities in the imperial government. Saigō established his private school for physical and military training after his return to Kagoshima. People from all around Japan came to train with him as a samurai. By 1877, he had a student body of about 20,000. But now the government was worried that Kagoshima may spark a samurai uprising. Seizing weapons was one of their ill-advised attempts to exert power. This action only served to heighten tensions in Japan, which was already on edge. Afterwards, the Kagoshima Arsenal and Navy Yard were attacked by a band of Saigō's followers on January 29, 1877. Knowing that their social rank would soon be meaningless, the samurai were forced to commit this bold act of desperation. In a time when samurai might legally murder an ordinary citizen for desecrating them, they had now fallen from grace because they served no use anymore. So began the uprising that would eventually topple the imperial government. Saig's followers initiated the uprising while he was hunting in the mountains. Becoming their leader was something he unwillingly consented to. The man who had become a national hero in Japan for his role in restoring imperial control was now actively working to overthrow it. Saigō planned to march on Tokyo on February 15, 1877, to bring the samurai's complaints to the attention of the government. However, the imperial soldiers thwarted his assault at Kumamoto, sparking an all-out war. The imperial forces, perceived by the devoted samurai as merely armed peasants, pitted them against each other. Saigō did, in fact, employ weapons and provide his samurai with them. The samurai continued to favor the sword over the bayonet, in contrast to the imperial armies. Mei saw Saigō and his army retreat. By September, Saigō realized the situation was bleak due to his army's numerous defeats. The number of samurai killed in combat was in the tens of thousands. On a hilltop overlooking Kagoshima, he would now stage his final stand. The government forces made one more push in September 1877. In response, the samurai opened fire with a barrage of bullets. But their ammunition ran out quickly, so they had to go back to their original guns. Out of 40,000 soldiers, only about 500 samurai remained. A superiorly armed imperial force numbering in the tens of thousands met them. The samurai, realizing they had met their demise, mounted one final rush into battle. They held out until September 24, 1877. Those armed mounted their mounts, brandished their swords, and charged headlong into death. A gunshot wound to Saigō's hip fractured his bone. Satisfied with his destiny, he performed seppuku, the respectable ritual, death for samurai. He reached for his blade and plunged it into his abdomen. Afterwards, his companion severed his head. Both sides suffered massive casualties, with nearly 12,000 people dying and another 20,000 injured. There were no longer any samurai. The abolition of social classes forced the survivors to adjust to a new social order or face the challenges of a dynamic Japan. All of Saigō's hopes and dreams were dashed when his insurrection failed. To the Japanese, nevertheless, Saigō became an iconic figure, personifying the authentic Japanese character who was prepared to lay down his life for what he believed in. Rumors circulated that he had lived and was plotting behind the scenes, since his severed head was never located. In a dramatized version that was comparable to his actual insurrection, Saigō was subsequently depicted in the film The Last Samurai. The true Saigō, though skilled with a gun, could not fully abandon his samurai identity, because he was one of them. Unlike many of his fellow samurai, he was able to adapt to change. He was willing to face whatever tragedy befell them. I pray the video was entertaining for you all. Be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and share button if you did. Post your thoughts on The Last Samurai in the comments, and I'll see you again with another video.